This is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 18, 2017. We'll start by reminding everybody that we're being recorded. And then we always start with a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you. So at 7:30, we've got a public hearing for laying out some streets. At 7:15, we've got another public hearing about laying out more streets. So why don't we start on some action items? I guess we have a citizen comment section on our agenda now.
Did anybody sign in?
Do they have to sign in?
And the agenda policy, they're supposed to get sign in.
Yeah, so, all right, so we'll move on to action items.
Bill, you should have a permanent edition at the top, just printed in. Golden Sorrow, topic, Medfield Hospital.
Perhaps you should go to the licenses and permits.
You can't speak now unless you've signed in.
Oh, the action items is the warrant articles. All right, so we'll go to the consent agenda, which is licenses and permits. Do we do these all at once now, or how do we do these now?
Depends what it is they're looking for.
These are the things that are, it said you could put on even if they came in last minute because they don't require any publicity events. It's like Girl Scout cookie sales and things like that. So it's up to you if you want to kill it or all at once. They'll all be out here, you know, but we'll have to wait around for Cal's hearing.
As a practice, I mean, what happens beyond tonight isn't of any great significance, but you're going to need to evaluate each one and deal with them accordingly going forward. So probably a better practice to just vote them each separately.
So our first item on our, that we're going to do separately then is Medfield Green requests permission to display signs May 3 through May 24 advertising May is Green Month at the transfer station.
I move that we grant permission.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Medfield Youth Baseball Organization requests a parade permit for opening day, Sunday, May 7, 2017, and permission to place signs announcing the event. The selectmen are cordially invited to participate in the parade. Note, time of the parade is 3 p.m. this year.
I move that we grant the parade permit.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Did they identify where they want to put the signs, the usual places?
Yeah, you should put
Yeah,
that in the letter.
well, they can only put them in the usual places, which is another one of those things. Now that we have policies for the meeting agendas, those usual places for signs is another thing that we should put into our selectmen policies. So that somebody other than Evelyn knows what they are. The Medfield Food Cupboard is working with the post office for the annual food drive on Saturday, May 13, 2017. Food Cupboard Board requests permission to display signs May 8 through 13 promoting the event.
I move that we grant permission as requested.
Second, with the understanding some usual places.
Okay.
I'm learning.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. 3 Square, New England organization, requests permission to conduct their annual bicycle ride for food through a corridor of Medfield on Sunday, September 24th. Ride to come through between 7:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m.
I move to grant their permission.
I have one question on this one only, that in the letter they said they were also asking for a police detail. Is that separate, is that something else that comes with this, or is that just something between the police
That
department?
should be something they should arrange with the police department.
Yeah. Okay.
We should-
They've been in contact with Chief.
Okay, okay.
I
Then,
wasn't sure from their letter whether they were asking one for, it would be gratis, or whether they were expecting to pay for it, but
yeah.
I'll find out.
I think you set a policy that any group out of town, they should pay for their own details. If they were a local in-town group, that they would, if we had the police available, we would cover it. But for out of town, they were on their own police details.
So should we note that that's the understanding of our approval? If we approve it, that's our understanding that the detail, they'll pay for the detail.
Well, it's usually up to the chief to determine whether he feels that there's a police presence needed. That would be the first determination, and then you go from there, how that was going to be handled.
But they've requested it in their letter.
They asked for it,
they asked for it. So if they, I guess if they want to pay for it, they can have it. If they don't want to pay for it and the chief feels they don't need it, then it's up to them.
This is only the request for permission to conduct the bike ride.
That's all from the select.
Yeah, what's behind my question is, do we want to put any do the selectmen want to put any parameters around how that will happen? Or are we just saying, yeah, go ahead and do it?
It's actually up to the chief to determine what he
Yeah,
feels the need for one.
Okay.
And
The issue is how many participants, the route, are you crossing intersections and how are you gonna accomplish that, things like that, so.
Well, so they estimated to be 150, and the issue was the intersection coming out of South Street and doing the zigzag on 27 to South Street Extension. But that's the only reason I really brought it up, because that is kind of it's an understandable intersection on why they would say. I'm not hung up, I'm just trying to figure out how this stuff works.
Yeah,
So.
well, I think that's all stuff the chief should figure out. what them-
Okay. Another second
usually
motion.
Sunday morning, very light traffic.
Okay. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, two. And that's probably another one of those things, Mike, you said that that's a sort of a policy, that if they're out-of-town organization, that's probably another one of those policies that we should write in our policy book then.
Yeah, that was something you discussed recently at one of your meetings.
You guys agreed to
There's kind of, in my experience, it's kind of a distinction, is having police actually escort you through the whole route, and the other is to just have, at one or more locations where you need to, traffic and safety considerations, hold up traffic. So it depends how that's been worked out.
I think where it could become an issue would be something like the Pan Am bike ride, where they would come in and they say, we're coming through, we're sending 2,000 people through, we're not paying you detail. What do you do? They refuse to pay. Do you let them go without a detail and put people at risk? And last year, the governor rode through them too.
I guess my only point is that as we discover things that are policies, like you say, for the police detail for town groups versus out-of-town groups, that we should just start writing those down.
Yeah.
So that we have a list of these things.
Yeah, and I think the police really should have policies on these too, what their determination is going to be, because the chief will be leaving in a couple of years too.
Well, I think the chief was drafting policies and procedures, because I don't think that there were one. I know that when the bylaw committee didn't get any written materials from the police, I think, because there weren't any.
That's right, yeah. I think he was trying to work on that.
I think the chief was working on that.
So just one more point, just learning here. So the policies that are set by the selectmen, who's the custodian? Do you have one, or?
There isn't any record of most of them, they're just sort of ad hoc. That's why I'm suggesting we start writing them down.
There's actually traffic rules and regs that badly need to be updated. It would encompass some of what we've been talking about.
I heard a reference to policies that the selectmen have adopted, and I'm sitting there at some point thinking I should read something, or nothing's written down. They'll get all that off. This is just a consent calendar.
Christina's working on an updated policies and procedures.
Okay, that was, so Christina's got the ball. Okay, that's all I know.
It's a little bit like the English Constitution does. We know that they exist, but we're not sure.
Yeah. One problem with the traffic rules and orders, we had a student a couple of years ago that went through and put them all on a computer, mapped them all out, what the speed, stop sign, yield signs, everything for the whole town. And I wanted to rescind all the old ones because they were adopted over a series of years and they were in a book and safe, and revote them all as one item. It'd probably cost you $10,000 to advertise them. We were hoping that on the governor's municipal modernization bill, they were going to allow you not to advertise in a newspaper, that you could put it online or on your website. And he put that in his legislation. The legislature knocked it out. I assume the newspaper publishers didn't want the loss of revenue, so they were able to lobby the legislature to knock it out. So if they claim they're not political, don't believe it. Yeah.
2 new permit requests. Church of the Advent requests permission to post signs 2 weeks prior to their May 13, 2017 plant sale.
I move to grant permission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Medfield girls basketball team requests permission to hold car wash behind Town Hall on Saturday, June 3.
I move to grant permission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And now we're ready for our first hearing, I guess. So this is a street layout as a public right-of-way, a part of Vinyl Road between Mitchell Street and Cottage Street.
And you should note that it was, for the record, that it was published in the newspaper, the notice of hearing.
So noted, it was published.
And declare the hearing open,
And I declare the hearing open then. And then do we have material on this?
This was something recommended by the planning board. I think Mark is more familiar with it because he was I believe attended the planning board meetings.
Okay.
This is rather an unusual one, so I'll let him explain it.
There is a small section of Vinyl Road that was never laid out as a public way. You wouldn't know it if you traversed it, but it was crossing private property. I was generally aware of it from years ago when a local builder was trying to do something. But more recently, the owner of the property, being aware of that, determined that if they subdivided the land in the middle of the road, the land on the westerly side to the railroad tracks could be a separate buildable lot. And in the course of that work, they had a plan prepared, and we addressed the issue of the public right-of-way, that they basically waived their rights in order to allow the public to continue to traverse the property. So the difference is we're not gonna own the so-called fee for you, 2 of the 3 of you. We're not gonna own the underlying road. We just have essentially an easement, a right to pass and repass on the property. And that's been laid out on a plan. They went ahead and got the approval on the subdividing the lot. In fact, one of the lots, the vacant lot's being built upon now. But this was worked out last year, between last town meeting and now, that they would cooperate in the town laying out that final section of road.
Is this an issue of them needing a certain amount of land to qualify as a subdividable lot? So
They need the underlying land, yeah.
In order to meet
Right.
that requirement, I get it, okay.
And with that land, they have a buildable lot, meets the dimensional
Right.
requirements.
Yeah.
Without that.
I was trying to figure out why anybody wanted to continue to own the land under a road that you'd granted an easement.
It's not so much continuing on the land, it's what the town takes for rights for the road. It's not uncommon, and particularly down the Cape,
Yeah,
a lot of communities only take rights away. They never own the underlying roads.
okay.
So you don't need to. And we also did that here on one other subdivision because there was some title issues, and it was the cleanest way to do it. So Kettle Pond Estates we just have rights of way up there.
Mhm.
It allows you to do everything you could have done otherwise.
We have a lot of other rights of way for sewer and water lines or rights
Right,
of way.
well, that's, yeah.
They're
Yeah,
on
yeah.
for that. This is unusual for road, I think, for us.
How long has it been this way?
Oh, it's
1930s or something like that, it goes way back.
well long enough that if you wanted to talk about a prescriptive easement, you can make out a case, but it gets real dicey when you're trying to establish a prescriptive easement on behalf of a municipality as opposed to the quote-unquote public at large, and this is just way cleaner, and you don't have any damage claims floating around. As long as they were doing it anyway, they were gonna do it one way or the other, so it was an opportune time.
So this is an article at town meeting.
Yes,
to approve
because
it.
right now, there's only one way to lay out a public way, which is this process.
Okay, so it requires their vote.
They need to vote to
Lay it out.
lay it out, as shown on the plan.
Do you have a copy of the plan?
Yeah, I did when I left the office. It's here somewhere.
Is that a copy of the plan over there, Evelyn?
No, this is just Eric and Corey.
Is it the whole length of, it appears to be the whole length of,
No.
Between the two properties.
oh, it's just between the two properties?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, it's just part of Vinyl Road.
Do you have copies of it there?
Nope.
It's already been put on record at the registry. That's a copy of it. We can make some copies of that too.
So that's the section between Mitchell and Cottage Street. Literally that section right there. So it's basically a block.
Yeah. Make some copies of that.
Yeah.
So typically, you would have an acceptance plan, but in this case, this plan was already put on record, so all we're gonna do is go through the process. And after town meeting, if town meeting accepts it, I'll come back to you, and you'll actually do a confirmatory order of taking of the right-of-way.
So
That when we get our big map?
No,
We get
there
to
is no
sign?
big map.
No big map.
The original of that is on at the registry is a big map.
So Mark, the selectmen laying out the road, that's simply designating that where this map says the road is
Yes,
where we want it to be.
correct. As
And
shown
where,
on that map.
and where this map says we want it to be is where it is.
Right.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
And there's actually an agreement that the property owners entered into, and confirmed all that.
Okay.
Cottage and Vinyl, so it'd be between these two properties. That was the garage where they're building it, and he needs that for his frontage for the lot on Cottage.
So he needs the road, the land, he needs the land under the road to give him the size of the lot.
Right, exactly.
Well, and I believe they ended up putting getting dimensional requirements using Cottage Street. That's why he needs the road, yeah.
I see.
is everything else around here a public way, Mark?
Yes. This is just a fluky situation.
So that'll connect the rest of the public ways in the area then?
Like I said, everybody's been using it. If you had to make an argument that you required it by
Adverse possession.
prescriptive right.
But once this becomes a public way, then everything else is a public way. Oh, the rest of Vinyl
Yes.
and Cottage and.
But it'd be a public right-of-way, not a public way.
Right, this will, yes.
Yeah.
right
But
away.
practically, there's no difference.
Right, yeah. The only difference might be, I know we had a case where there was, it was down on Granite Street, where they only made a travel right-of-way. And when they went to put a sewer line in, the guy said, you only have a travel right-of-way. You can't put a sewer line in my property unless you compensate me for it. So it can be, and depending on the legalities of it, there could be an issue.
I suppose that the property owner would still be paying taxes on that portion of the land that's under the road.
If you like.
Yes, yeah.
Three copies.
Okay.
That, we were talking about what happens if the town, say, wanted to put a sewer line down that road. Does the right-of-way,
Well, when we do the taking, it's gonna include those rights.
it will include those,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what we did, as I said, I have the one we did on Kettle Pond.
Okay.
And the house is already there now, so that the builders got, or the owners got what they want.
That's why when we, and I'll go over this Friday, I'm meeting with the moderator and the chairman of the warrant committee. If any of you are around, you want to attend, we're meeting at 8:30 in my office to go over the articles for town meeting to determine what's on the consent calendar and what's on what. And I added these two articles to the consent calendar, because usually there's no objection to it. It's a routine article,
Yep.
and if it avoids the second night of town meeting, it might be worth it. If anyone objects, wants to discuss it, they can have it pulled off, but, so.
So do we have a motion then to to the street layout.
Yep, I would move that we accept the street layout as a public right-of-way, the portion of Vinyl Road between Mitchell Street and Cottage Street as reflected in the map on file at the registry and as approved by the planning board and reflected in what Mark has provided us.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
You'll make that look okay, Evelyn?
Pardon?
You'll make that look okay?
Oh, sure.
We move right into our next street layout as a public way, which is Eric Road Extension, 0 plus 00.00 to 900, and Quarry Road Extension, Station 8 plus 88.09 to 16 plus 97.87, and any and all easements thereto. And this was also, so we'll open the public hearing, and this was advertised in the paper as well.
So that's what brings Mr. Caldwell here. Woodcliff Hills.
Could you just use the microphone, Mr. Caldwell, so that the people at home can hear you?
All right, so we put the plan up for acceptance. All right, so now for Quarry Road and Eric Road, we applying for the acceptance of the road. The legal documents have been checked out as far as I know from Mark Searles, and they've been a while doing it, but the plan is all done, and all the changes should be done to accept it, and we appreciate if the town would accept it. And you're happy with the plan, Mark, and everything?
Finally.
Finally? Sorry so late, but it's
It
done,
wasn't you.
so.
So Eric Road Extension was actually originally developed by a separate developer. It's a extended cul-de-sac or non-through road. And then the Caldwells acquired that and also at the same time completed Woodcliff Hills, which is what resulted in Quarry Road Extension. So in addition to the roadways themselves, there are, in the usual drainage easements, there are also trails that were agreed upon previously, as well as, in one case, an emergency vehicle access, which you can see on the, particularly, I think it shows on both, but particularly it's on the Quarry Road Extension, connecting the Eric Road Extension to Quarry Road Extension, and that's a road with a gate that emergency vehicles can use. And then there are several connectors and through trails that are part of a trail system that goes from the trustee's property
To the Brown property.
to the, well, yeah, to the Brown property, supposed to go all the way back into town.
Those trails, Mark, are ones that already exist,
They were agreed to as part of the subdivision.
so they're new trails that'll be put in.
Well, they've, yeah,
In some cases, they're the existing roadway. For example, Sturbridge Road, I believe, is.
and there were some old cart paths up through the area that, at any rate, in the course of the Woodcliff approvals, the trails were located, or tentatively located, to be finalized at the time of the various road acceptances. This is the last of Woodcliff Hills roads to be accepted, so it's now being finalized, as shown on this.
Trails are all in.
In fact, there's one of these lots that shows a trail and pedestrian access easement. We're getting the whole lot for drainage anyway, so we'll simply indicate that it's both for drainage and for
All right, okay,
recreation.
all right,
That's Lot 1H over here.
okay.
So it's basically, it's access off of Green Street and then through,
Mine right?
trying to situate this where the back end.
Yeah, all the roads tend to convert, I mean, the trails tend to all kind of
That's the easement with the gate.
merge through into there.
Gates here. And the car paths go up here.
So So the zero, just so I understand this whole road is the Eric Road extension. 0, 0 there, it goes out.
That's it.
That's the whole road, okay.
Now, Eric Road originally was developed back in, I think, the late 60s,
Yeah.
and there was this chunk of land that was left over that a developer named Musto got a hold of, and there was protracted proceedings before he finally got 6 lots approved. Actually, he got more than that from the court, but ultimately could only build 6 because it's wet in there anyway. So conservation exercised some jurisdiction. So somewhere along the line, the Woodcliff Hills subdivision and that one merged. It was a big issue at the time that there not be a direct vehicular connection,
That's
as
where
far
the
as
gate-
townspeople were concerned, between Woodcliff Hills into Eric Road Extension would take you out the back way and ultimately over to Pine Street. There was tremendous neighborhood opposition to that. And so ultimately, the compromise was this emergency vehicular access that's showing between Eric Road Extension and Quarry Road.
Are there houses on Eric Road extension right now, or are these
There
all
are
lots?
6, yeah, there are
They're
6.
they're all built. Yeah.
So right now, I'm just trying to understand the significance of what we're doing here. The Eric Road extension right now then is a non-accepted road,
Correct.
which effectively is a private road. and
Right.
I got it, okay.
That's right.
got it.
And the principal consequence of that, frankly, is that the town assuming the maintenance, ongoing maintenance of these
Yeah,
roads.
yeah.
People buying into subdivisions assume at some point
Yeah.
the municipality is gonna take over that responsibility.
And a station, by the way, is 100 feet, so if it goes from station 0 to station 5.44, it would be 544 feet.
Mark, you mentioned that we were supposed to be getting trails. to-
Those will be part of the grants from the Caldwells. It's not an issue.
Yeah, so that we
They're
have
showing
the-
on these plans, and so actually the process, the convoluted process that exists even for subdivision plans right now is the developer finishes developer initially gets it all approved by the planning board, everybody assumes these will be public ways at some time with the related infrastructure. It sits there until the developers finally got the work done, then they submit the plans. Now a statute that was passed in the 1800s kicks in, and the first thing you have to do is this layout hearing and order a layout. Then you go to town meeting, the town meeting votes acceptance and authorizes the selectmen to actually acquire the title. And then you have 120 days following town meeting for the use of the Board of Selectmen to acquire that title, either by a deed and conveyances of easements from the developer if they're cooperating, or by an order of taking if they're not. So I've been working with the Caldwell's attorney, John Roach, and that should just be a formality. The toughest thing here was getting the engineer who had done the work to get these acceptance plans done in the form that we needed them done,
This has been to town meeting before.
because the engineer didn't get the plans done
Yeah.
properly.
They were a year doing the engineering, so sent back with some of the things that weren't done, so they had to get them on, so he finally finished them up, so,
My understanding
So-
is he's winding down his career, this is the last thing, and
yeah, it is.
so.
Do these acceptance plans include the trail easements and
Yeah.
the lots?
Yes,
So they'll all be part of when
Yes.
when this plan.
Trails on, and that was part of the approval of the subdivision, we built a trail. And we also needed an outlet from Quarry to Eric, so, because it was a dead-end street, we needed an outlet, so that's why we bought the Musto land. Because he wasn't going along fast enough to get a permit approval of a house on Quarry, so we bought the land so we could complete it, so it would be done.
Okay, and so the trails that are on this are actually trails people are probably already using.
Yeah, they do use them, and sometimes the horses go through, Brown
Okay.
takes the horses through, because we, on one part of it there, down further on Minuteman, we had to build a little bridge over a little wetland, and it's a stainless steel post and everything, so you can walk through but, with the tick problem, it's got so bad that a lot of people don't take it now, but there are some, and they get through there, you'll see them, yeah.
And this will go on the consent calendar too.
Yes, yeah.
Well, it may, as long as it's a unanimous vote anyway, because you need a 2/3 authorization to require the title, so.
So I went down your trail, one of your trails years ago on my bicycle, and I was impressed because it was like a miniature road. It was a well-made trail.
Yeah, it was a pretty good trail. We stoned all the way through it. I mean, sometimes
That's what I noticed,
the
was the
motorcycles
stone.
went through, so we had to kind of stop down. Any bikes, you
We
know?
have unfortunately had occasional issues with landowners that didn't seem to like the idea that there were public trails
Yeah, I
in
know.
proximity to their
Well, it's
property.
good. Some of them, they were going close to the backyard, so that's part of the deal.
So the reason that I asked about the trails, Mark, was because I had some sense that there were trails from that area that were supposed to connect to the downtown, but that don't connect yet. Is there some issue with that?
There's a gap with the Brown property that Mike alluded to a few minutes ago. It goes back to about the time I was appointed town council, so it was already in progress when I came on board. My understanding is that that it arose from Mr. Brown's acquisition of the property from the trustees of reservations. It was part and parcel of that. The original thing was that they couldn't determine the exact location because they didn't know how Woodcliff Hills was going to be developed. But that rationale dropped out once Woodcliff Hills was developed. So we know where it should enter and leave the Brown property on both sides, but it simply hasn't come to pass.
So is that something that we could follow up on and try to get the trail?
We've made some attempts.
Apparently, there's nothing in the deed from the trustees requiring that
Oh,
a
so there's
trail has
no
been.
requirement on the property owner to actually do it?
Right,
Okay.
so it'd be voluntary, so.
So I'm thinking, Mark, that this is the situation where you and I met, because I was on the ZBA at the time, that we granted permission to Mr. Musto to do the Eric Road development, and I then found I got sued by you and the Concom. I think that's when we met. So,
As I said, this was protracted proceedings. We ended up in the land court. We went up to the appeals court on this.
yeah.
He just said he didn't know what a good guy you were at the time.
Yeah. We used to get sued all the time on the ZBA, and it was very irritating because they'd send us certified mail, and I was never home, and I had to go down to the post office on Saturdays.
Well, that's right, because that's the overlap, that the old, before Concom, zoning bylaw already addressed wetlands. And therefore, when you have property that is within that jurisdiction, you still have to get a special permit, I believe, from the ZBA. It overlaps with Concom's jurisdiction. And by then, there was already a huge battle going with Mr. Musto in terms of what we thought was too dense a development given the conditions.
Yeah, I still remember the site walk in there and how wet it was, and being astonished that anybody could build anything there, so good, congratulations to making it work.
So in that you've raised the question, I'm looking at the map here, and it looks like that pedestrian way is right on the border of the Browns' property,
Yeah,
but the adjoining property is town of Medfield property? So if...
I don't know, I didn't
Well,
have
Brown-
anything
I'm
to
just-
do with the locating.
There's the way.
Oh, and there's
Here's,
town.
Brown-
that's the town, so if we really wanted to do something, sure doesn't seem like it would be that hard to either go straight down to North Hatters Hill Road on improved way, or put it on our side. Yeah.
He comes up.
Yeah, you can see right
Maybe
where,
it's what goes on, yeah.
you can see right where the trail is stubbed into, right up to Brown's border.
Right, but see, just to the right of that is town of Medfield property, it says.
Yeah, well, you have to be
That's
on
the
site
drainage
to see
area,
that.
yeah.
When we went up to look at this one time, there's like a 30-foot ledge.
There's all kinds of
Yeah, it's a
topography
property.
issues up there, so.
So you'd have to be a mountain goat to
Yeah.
climb the trail, so.
A little rock climbing.
I don't, what is this anyway, do you know?
I think it was one of those wetland properties that was taken at the end of Hatters Hill. It was too wet to build on. The town acquired it.
But that's, I remember the owner showed up and deeded it to, offered it to.
I believe so,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Looks like it's,
So that you need hip boots or to get through.
Well, Concom's not gonna want you trucking to a wetland anyway.
Quarry, yeah. Yeah, there's quarry, yeah. Where's Brown's? Is that
This would be
Brown?
the Browns right
That's
here.
Brown?
But that apparently is town of Medfield, that 007.
We think it's leftover subdivision property, wetlands
From
that,
Hatters Hill, yeah, very wet, I believe, down
Yeah, it
there.
looks like there's a lot of wet in there.
I remember now the developer actually coming forward and, you know, because he didn't want to pay taxes anymore and offered the land to the town.
That might make it even more suitable for a walk, a
Well,
walking
you
path.
can't unless you, if you're gonna do that, you'd have to, build some kind of a wooden walkway or whatever, and then it has to meet Concom's issues, and it's expensive.
That was one of the reasons we delayed on trying to connect to the Brown property until we found out exactly what we owned. and
Because that's
could
upland.
connect
It connects to, if it were completed the way it was envisioned, it's upland.
Where I was, I don't know how much would have to be like walkway, but I'm just thinking of Eagle Scout projects with Boy
No,
Scouts.
it's way
or-
more than that. It's major wetlands.
It's a wetland in there too.
Okay.
And we've got a proposed trail extension in Medway we're dealing with right now, and it's huge. It's engineering, it's the height it has to be given, flood levels and all. It's just, that's the town itself proposing to put it in on its own property.
So do we have a motion to accept the
I
layout?
move that we accept the street layout as public
Layout.
street layout.
Layout.
Oh, I move that we lay out
Yeah,
or adopt the street layout. So you don't say the public ways part of it? That's,
Well, the town meeting accepts the
okay.
public way.
So I move that we lay out the streets on Eric
Show it on
Road
the two
Extension,
plans.
Station 0+00.900 to 9 o'clock, and Quarry Road Extension, Station 8+88.09 to 16+97.87, as shown on the maps, 7 feet to my left.
two acceptance plans. they're called.
Two acceptance plans, 7 feet to my, 7 and 9 feet to my left.
And any and all easements?
What?
And any and all easements?
There's no downside to saying that.
And any and all easements.
Do we have a second on
I
that?
second that we lay out the land in accordance with Selectman Marcucci's description as appended by Selectman Peterson.
Whoa, this is getting scary.
This is-
Any
this
further
is-
discussion?
No, this is a bulletproof motion right here.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
You may be back next year, Mr. Conway.
It's all right. Come around.
Al, it's good seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Mark,
It was good seeing you.
nice to see you.
Take care, Calvin. See ya, yeah.
Okay.
We'll see you 50 years from now.
Oh, we got one lot.
Really? Wow, geez.
I got 3 or 4 lots.
Is Is it true you're thinking of going to business with Musto with all that building he's doing down in Westwood now?
Feel like when I bought it, I paid $220,000 for 350 acres. Now I have 3 lots in Iroquois and 1 lot's worth that, so a little bit of change, 50 years, huh? But I had here too, Mark.
So shall we go and do the review of the warrant articles now?
Sure. Just so for Gus's edification, the selectmen, it's unusual, I believe, in Medfield, the selectmen are the Board of Survey rather than the planning board, which means that the selectmen are the ones that actually have to lay out the street lines. So what you're doing is you are laying out the exterior lines of the streets and any drainage easements and whatnot that associate with it. And then, once you lay that out, it goes to the town meeting, and the town meeting accepts it as a public way and authorizes you to make any takings necessary to implement that and record the deed. So you're involved in the layout tonight, then the town meeting accepts and authorizes you to proceed with the taking, so.
And that's because, as I said, it's a statute from the 1800s when a town was actually creating roads for travelers from one place to another. When the subdivision control law came in, they never went back and provided a simplified procedure to make subdivision roads public ways, even though it's obviously intended to do that, because subdivision roads, really, all they're doing is providing frontage and access.
So given my limited technical ability to actually lay out a road in any actual sense, who actually does make sure the drainage and all that stuff is where it needs to be?
Planning board's consultants, as
Okay.
part of the subdivision process, would have approved the plans in the first place,
Yep.
supervised the construction,
Okay.
made sure everything was good to go, and that's why you would actually have a planning board recommendation to accept the roads.
And then the public works director also goes out and inspects to make sure that everything's in good shape. For example, are the berms, the correct type of berms installed? Are they in good condition? Are the catch basins do they drain properly, that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
I think my real question around the Eric Road, given that it had come up at a town meeting before and was pulled back because the plans were determined to be inadequate, I was giving you credit for being the one who figured out. that
No,
they
it
were-
passed town meeting.
Yes, it did. They
didn't
just
get the
failed
plans
it, yeah.
done enough time
Right.
within 120 days after town meeting.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
Right?
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
was the,
okay.
They just didn't get it in within the 120 days.
And then when we actually went back and looked this year, because they got them in earlier, we realized that the plans were seriously deficient. We went back and forth 3 or 4 times, including actually sitting down with Scott Caldwell, Cal's son, and the engineer here, and Sarah and myself, and going through each of these plans, and they still came back deficient and had to go back for further revisions. It's been a very, very tedious process. But then, I think now there's been enough eyes on them that they're covering all the bases.
and it was definitely on more than one town meeting warrant. And it was on there and pulled and then passed. I mean,
Yeah,
They've been
this would
done
be
for a
the-
while.
Yeah.
it's been around.
I think this is the 3rd time on town meeting, but the 4th time for laying out, because I think one year you laid out and they never got it to town meeting, so.
And frankly, there's no compelling reason why you need this process. And I have actually attempted with the legislature, because Franklin, when I came on board, had like between 80 and 90 unaccepted subdivision roads. And on top of everything else, that's money loss, because you're not getting your chapter 90 reimbursement, because the streets aren't accepted yet. So we were looking for an expeditious way to do it, and I said to the TA, well, every town's got the same problem, rather than special legislation, why don't you let me try to draft something? So I did, I drafted a simplified procedure. Went in and testified at the State House. They thought it was a great idea, and each year it came this close to passing. There's no opposition, it just never got there. Finally, the state rep came back and said, I give up, I can't get this through. So we did a special legislation, it sailed through in a couple of months. Medway turned around and did the same thing. So you still, it expedites the process, but there's no reason why you should be following an antiquated process from the 1800s. It was drafted for an entirely different purpose, which is literally to lay out roads, as Mike was explaining, where you're actually taking people's property to do that.
You may get some calls. We've tried to keep people up to date on this, but when this notice goes out to them, and I think, are these streets corrected that problem? It used to be you owned to the center line of the roadway. So when we
No,
Made-
no, because Caldwell preserved the.
preserve the rights,
Right.
so we would have to send notices out to people that we're making an eminent domain taking on their property. And people would call up and alarmed, what do you mean you're taking my property? Well, they didn't realize it was the street that they were actually taking, so. Now they require the developer to have that as a separate lot, so you don't have to go through that.
The planning board rules actually require the developer to retain ownership of the roads.
So, Mike, did you want to lead us through the warrant articles?
Sure. You've got the motions attached. You have the warrant report, which I have to give particular compliments to Evelyn and Chris for the yeoman work that they had to put in to get this done. Actually, people have commented on the new format, which was done out of necessity because it was so large, the warrant, but it actually turned out quite nice.
Because we
It's much
determined
easier to
that
read.
All
Yes.
bylaws would be printed
Yes.
verbatim, no summaries,
Yes.
so.
And Evelyn spent 3 hours in the post office last week trying to get squared away the mailing. I happened to walk in and I ended up for about an hour there. She had to go back again today. They went from $800 last year to $1,800. And then when she went to, or they delivered the warrants, they said it was going to be $3,100, and they wouldn't deliver them unless they had the entire amount of money. And then, so both of us started ranting and raving, and they came back and they said, well, we have some good news for you, because all of these are going to be delivered in Medfield. It's a different classification. So instead of $3,100, we owe you $600. Instead of $1,800, it's only going to be $1,200. But they wouldn't give us the money. They wouldn't trust us without the money, but we had to trust them without the money, so we still haven't seen the $600 check back. They said it would take 10 to 12 days, and Evelyn went up again today to find out. And what do they have to check with Brockton and what the procedures are? I mean, it's just it's a nightmare every year trying to get these things mailed. And plus, it was so late getting the warrant printed. And when did the town report go to the printer? Was it Friday? Today? Today. So if that gets back in time for town meeting, it's going to be a miracle. So, and it was, they just didn't get the reports in. They had and because of the presidential election, it's about 50 pages longer than usual. There were a lot of elections last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to have 2 more elections this fall. Actually, one in the spring if either of the overrides passes at town meeting. And then because of the resignation of Senator Timilty, there has to be a primary vote and a regular vote. So there'll be 2 additional elections in the fall. So we thought we were getting off easy this year, but it doesn't look that way. So. Okay, so for the warrants, if we can start with the motions. The consent calendar has been considerably expanded. I don't know if there's any extra copies of that over there. Or you got them, okay. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 28, 31, 32 be voted as set out in the warrant, and Articles 20, 22, and 23 to be dismissed. Now, there's a potential for the article on the rail trail to be dismissed. We're trying to figure that one out, and hopefully by Friday, when I meet with the moderator, we'll see if that, what Christian Donner requested was that article on the rail trail looking for the $3,000 be dismissed, and instead the selectmen vote the money out of the downtown funds. And the question is, can we change downtown to town to permit that? And that's something, I don't know if you people have a position on that, or as I said, I'll be meeting with the moderator. I asked town council, he said it was really the moderator's call whether that would be within the scope of the original article. So.
Yeah, my first reaction to it is it's not. But
Okay.
Mike, on the consent calendar, those 2 road acceptances, are they on this list, or are there 2 more?
Yes, I believe they are. Yeah, I think they're.
Yeah, they're 31 and 32.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the decision on whether to dismiss that article, the decision whether to transfer the funds will be separate, because the article at town meeting appropriates the money at the selectmen's jurisdiction. So you will have to decide when you have a request whether to transfer those funds to be used to pay for the design phase of the rail trail. So if you are not willing to do that, or you're not able to do that, then they probably need to know before they decide to agree to dismissal of the rail trail.
That's why I brought it up. I wouldn't want to personally, I wouldn't want to blindside them by having them withdraw it, and then, I mean, it's only one opinion, but my initial reaction to that is that the funds for the downtown were appropriated for purposes of developing the downtown. And I think they tie into the, as I recall, that commitment was made back when the meals tax was passed.
Yeah.
So the idea that it's just generally for the use of the town, that doesn't, I think that kind of breaks with that commitment, so.
Yeah, I don't think there was an agreement.
No, there was
to use the
never an
meals tax
agreement.
for that. I mean, I think that was some people who advocated for the adoption of the meals tax thought that was something it might be used for. I don't think there was ever any agreement that we would use the meals tax money.
There was never a binding agreement. There was a discussion in the warrant committee around the rationale for approving it, was with the idea that that if we approved it with a commitment, not a binding agreement, but a commitment to take some of that money that was being generated by the businesses downtown and plow it back into making it more attractive to be downtown, that at least they would see a return on the taxes that they were collecting, a partial return, so that's it.
So Mike's recollection of that is my recollection, which is that that was an argument that was made at the time in favor of the meals tax, but there was never any binding agreement or commitment.
Correct.
And I will say, I think this kind of slipped through the cracks, is we had talked about this issue with respect to amending that article to permit the money to go to the rail trail back in January, and so it didn't make it into the final revision to the warrant article. So I mean, I don't have a problem. I agree with Gus that it says downtown, it should be downtown, and that's what's in there. You know, if the moderator would entertain a motion to expand that.
Well, he can't, it's, the warrant, remember, the warrant articles are basically at this junction etched in stone. All you're talking about is what motions you can bring and whether the motion falls fairly within the article.
Right.
It expands slightly, that's the moderator's call. And the problem is the word downtown, you know, strictly within this, forget any agreements, just on the face of the language in the warrant, it says downtown.
Right. I mean, not to be a lawyer about it, but downtown's not defined anywhere. Right, I mean, what's in the downtown, not in the downtown, I mean.
My concern actually has more to do with what the selectmen are trying to accomplish. We have an economic development committee that's focused on improving the downtown. We have been putting money into improving the downtown. I think we've made progress in improving the downtown, so it makes sense. There is no binding agreement, but if we're no longer worried about that anymore and it's time to put money in other more productive places, that's great. But it seems to me that the town has consistently been supporting the development of the downtown to try to improve the economics down there. So it doesn't make sense to me to kind of take this other thing and pull it out of there where we are deliberately putting money in order to kind of avoid having a straight up assessment of whether or not we want to put money into the rail trail.
They would still have the option of requesting the money under the original article for the rail trail.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem there is the warrant committee recommended unanimously dismissal. So,
Yeah.
although it's not on the consent calendar as a dismissal because it's.
So it's a legitimate issue for the townspeople to vote on and whether they want to put money into it rather than taking it off the article and slipping in through a different funding channel. And I feel a little bad about talking this way because I know Christian Donner's been doing a lot of work for years trying to get this through, and I'm always the guy that's kind of hanging up on an issue, even though philosophically I like the idea of rail trail. So I'm the guy that's probably been more of a pain in his butt than anybody else, to be honest with you.
Well, practically speaking, more so than legally, but this is only the first initial expenditure on this. And if that doesn't sit well with people, and you're gonna come back in the future, and this could come back to haunt you if, you know, it hasn't been absolutely, people weren't comfortable with the source of funding the first time around, so.
Right.
Although I think they're planning on fundraising most of the construction costs. I don't know that it's gonna cost the town much money, actually, so.
Well, they were talking between $2,000 and $3,000, so is the town share.
How much?
Of the
Between
design.
$2,000 and $3,000.
Oh, for this study?
Yeah,
For the design.
for this year,
Right,
yeah.
no, but I was talking about the construction money. I think that they were gonna try to fundraise the construction money.
Yeah, I think they were, well, when Christian was here, they talked about as a gravel, that it wouldn't be much if you did it in gravel. If you paved over
you get into drainage issues and other things.
Yeah,
and
they were gonna do a
it was-
stone
I think it
dust
was
and
$1.5 million.
gravel surface.
So initially, it was gonna be a stone dust gravel.
I've seen that surface over in Needham on that section of the Bay Colony Rail Trail there, and it's perfectly fine for biking and,
Yeah.
What worries me is when we were here in the last meeting, the meeting where it came up, you have the Norfolk Hunt Club that had concerns, and at the end of that discussion, it was supposed to be, well, the Norfolk Hunt Club and, you know, and Dick Judge, I was glad to see him make the commitment that we will definitely find a way to make this thing work, but we're putting in money into a design, you're talking about a bike path, and the concerns of the Norfolk Hunt Club was the damage that would do to their ability to use it. I would feel a whole lot better if those two groups came together and said, we found a way to make this work, and we do think a 1.3 mile trail to nowhere is really where we want to put money. I'd also like to see us work harder on getting Dover to sit there and put their rail trail all the way up to the border.
I'd had a call from Greg about the Norfolk Hunt Club issues, and the way that he explained it to me, it seemed eminently possible for there to be a solution that would work for both sides, so I'm.
If I heard them both say that, then I'd be feeling a whole lot better about
Yeah,
this.
I think I think that should be coming.
I mean, but I think the question for this town meeting is the question of the money, whether we're gonna they got a $20,000 grant for the design, they want $3,000, which, as I understand it, permits the engineer to spend some more time in meetings with the town and meetings with other people. And so I think, to your point, Gus and Pete, that the question of the coexistence of the rail trail and the Norfolk Hunt Club is in some ways a design question. Because there's a question of, I think the principal concern that I heard expressed from folks, I mean, the master's white paper outlines a number of them, but I think the most imminent has to do with the hound training and hound transportation, or the movement of the hounds in proximity to the rail trail. And a lot of it sounds like a design issue. And so, I mean, I think the question is, if we're gonna put the $3,000 question to the town meeting this year, it obviously becomes a proxy for a discussion over the people's feelings with the rail trail generally. But the discussion that you want to see happen between the Hunt Club and the Rail Trail Committee would be facilitated by completing a design, and to see if you can effectively design around the Hunt Club's concerns, as I think about it.
Well, the solution that Greg and I talked about was actually closing the trail for those times when the hounds were going across that area. And he indicated that, I think to me, that the Hunt Club would be willing to provide people to do the policing of that. And, you know, for a couple-hour closure, a couple times a week, that struck me as a solution that would work fine. So,
Right, I mean, if that's something that the Hunt Club would agree to. I mean, I think Greg was clear that he didn't speak for the Hunt Club.
right.
And so I think it would depend on the other concerns. So I mean, I guess this is our discussion on our position on Article 24, because I agree with Gus that this should stay as a separate article. If we're gonna talk about it, we shouldn't try to fold it in to the other one. And then I guess the question is what, and my position is I think we should be in favor of the $3,000, let them complete the design, and then see if they can work out between this year's town meeting and next year's town meeting, the Hunt Club's concerns, and then come back next year's town meeting season by the new cutoff date for articles of December 1st, 2017. And make the next step, which I think would be to authorize the selectmen to negotiate a lease. Would be next year's article.
Remember, this article was scaled back. The original article was written as if it was going to be a funds for the insurance, purchase of insurance, and for the town to accept the right-of-way or authorize the selectmen to sign a lease for the right-of-way with the MBTA. So then it was scaled back to just to the design funds. We're told would be a figure of 2,000 to 3,000. So
My issue around this particular rail trail is, and I've had it ever since it first came up 5 years ago, is I have a problem with the indemnification. And I think that it's even more so now because this is a 1.3 mile trail. It doesn't actually connect to anything. which says only a very limited number of people are actually going to take advantage of it, but the entire town is going to assume whatever liability comes with this that's there. So, and I've been consistent for 5 years. When it first came up, I said, love the idea, like to have rail trail, don't like the indemnification. And actually, with what I heard a couple of weeks ago, it's even worse, because at least 5 years ago, it was like, oh, you can get brownfield liability insurance, at least for the first few years. What I heard the other couple of weeks ago is, well, actually, that's pretty garbagey insurance anyway, you probably don't want it. So that just continues to be, I don't see why the town would accept a risk for what's fundamentally recreational benefits to what I think will be a very small number of people, especially now that it's literally a 1.3 mile. It may be that the Norfolk Hunt Club's concerns are almost inconsequential because nobody will need it, because it's only a 1.3 mile trail that doesn't go anywhere and nobody will use it. But
Yeah, my concern is the impact on the hunt club, because people don't really, and I'm not into horses, but the hunt club does keep an awful lot of land open in town.
Right.
If you look around and see the number of barns and stables, and not just the hunt club property, and if there's any adverse impact upon the hunt club, would they leave the town and open that property up for development?
in reading their statement, it was actually more than that, because the Hunt Club doesn't own that land.
Yes.
So the land is being
It's a
given,
trust.
or is being provided to the Hunt Club for use as a hunt club. I don't know who owns the land, but the people that own it are providing it for a purpose. At the point that that purpose starts to get eroded, I don't know why I would necessarily sit on a lot of land like that if the reason I wanted to keep it that way wasn't there anymore. I think I'd cash in and find a new place to go watch horses run through the woods. So,
And, yeah, and from that document that Greg passed out, I think if the land is no longer used for a hunt club, they have the right to dispose of it, so.
yeah. I was heartened to hear Dick Judge make the commitment. You know, I would like to see the rail trail folks work out something with the Norfolk Hunt Club where both of them come and say, yeah, it's okay, this is going to work if you want a 1.3 mile trail. I would be a lot more, I'd be trying a lot harder to figure out a way to make this make sense if we could connect it to the Dover Trail and you could use this trail to get all the way to Needham Junction. I'm kind of,
That would be much better.
that
But
would
I
be
think
a
it's
much different proposition.
I see it as a good start, and it does connect some things in town that I think will be useful and helpful to the townspeople, so. And I think that the environmental risk is just so remote that I
Then
tend
get
to
rid of that,
discount
then
that.
let's get them to get rid of that
Oh,
clause.
well, they won't. They
Well,
won't. You
there
just
must
have
be a
to.
reason then. That's my point. It's an inconsequential clause, but we can't get rid of it. It's important enough to keep it in, but it doesn't matter.
Well,
That's-
it's because they don't want to do different deals in different
Well,
places.
Yeah, well, they
So
should
they
probably
will-
get it out for everybody if there's no issue. That's my point. So anyway, that's all, so you know where I'm standing on this issue. What I would do for this particular, assuming the two of you would recommend passage, I would abstain. I would probably comment on why I'm abstaining if I can, but I'm not trying to kill it. If the townspeople want to put $3,000 in to do this study, and if this study, as part of it, actually is a collaborative discussion with the Norfolk Hunt Club to get to an option, I still have the reservation around indemnification. But if the townspeople have their eyes open and say, yep, we think we should take on this risk for the next century because we want to be able to walk down or bike down a 1.3 mile trail, as long as it's done with eyes open, I'm all for it.
Well, I guess, here's my.
It's close to my house.
I don't want to protract this, we just had 45 minutes on one article on the consent calendar, and now we're going to do half an hour on a $3,000 article. We'll be here till 5 o'clock in the morning. But my only point is, to me, the article this year is for $3,000 to design it. If the idea is we're not going to be comfortable with the indemnification, we don't think it's even worth designing it, then I think the position you should, that's the position you should take, then we should just say, well, we're going to be against this article because we're just going to kill the rail trail now and not spend any more money on design.
What I'm saying is I'm comfortable being a minority voice. I understand I'm being a
You don't have to
stickler.
abstain, you should just vote no and say we're wrong and we should just vote this article down and this should be the end of it. My view is, I think I have the same concern over indemnification that you do. I guess I have a more skeptical opinion of the level of rationality that's behind the judgment of the state agency that's insisting upon this provision. And so I think your assumption that there's definitely a reason for it may not be well-founded.
Or it could be as simple as a lawyer and the state figure out a way to indemnify the state from all
Yeah, I mean, it could simply be
liability
a
that could come up for the next century.
bureaucratic thing as well. So I'm not saying they've I doubt they've actually assessed the risk and said they need this, other than that this is the standard thing and it's sort of a take it or leave it because it doesn't really help the MBTA that much. But, so I have the same concerns. I think I'm willing to, given the amount of work that's been put into it, the interest that the town has, I would like to see a final design completed and see if they can work out the Norfolk Hunt Club's concerns. And then over the course of the next year, have join the issue finally of whether we're concerned enough with the indemnification just to say we're not going to do it. I mean, I would worry a little bit about if the idea is, our position is we're just going to be against this and we want it to stop, I wouldn't want to keep stringing the folks along and say, well, we might support this if this is resolved in the future. My own view is I do have the concern you do, but I would favor the $3,000 to complete the design, to see if it can be sorted out between the Hunt Club, see what happens in Dover. I mean, Dover's got another vote on this spring. You know, if Dover changes their mind, if they pass it, they extend it, then maybe, to your point, it becomes more worth it to figure out the indemnification issue, what the real risk is and all that. So I would be in favor of at least kind of taking this small additional step in being in favor of the $3,000.
Well, and the reason I said abstain is I'm not trying to torpedo, for all the reasons you said, if the town wants to put some money into a design, and at the end we see what the design is, and then we deal with the indemnification when it actually matters, that's probably the place I would take a harder stand. But right now, I was not intending to turn this into a major disagreement over $3,000.
So for our purposes tonight, then, we just need to assign this to one of us, Mike, to talk on at town meeting. Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to?
I don't care about talking about it.
Okay, I'll take this one then.
Do we have to talk about each of the articles?
You don't have to, but if someone asks a question or if you want to give a report on
So
it,
Pete has that.
moderator will ask you. Usually we'll let them know which articles you people want to give a report on. And
Okay.
other than that, unless someone asks a question, you don't.
So should we start going through the ones then that are on the motions, Mike?
Sure. The Article
9?
routine, that's routine. It does require an 80% vote. Article 10 is the reserve, additional funds for this year's reserve fund. I talked to Martha Fester about that this afternoon. She's going over the figures. There's about $20-some thousand for legal expenses, additional legal expenses. And then the fire chief has advised them that he will need a large transfer, although he doesn't know the exact amount yet, to get through the end of the year on his budget. So she's going to try to put together a figure. I think that this can be dismissed because under the Municipal Modernization Act, they've made permanent the ability to transfer funds between budgets. So I think there'd be enough left over in some of the departmental budgets that if you ran into a problem, you could transfer that money. And you could do that up to July 15th. Okay, Article 11, salary elected officials. The warrant committee, the only change there, the warrant committee is recommending an increase to $71,000 for the town clerk. The rest there's no change. Article 12, the personal administration plan. The personnel board is recommending a 2% increase in the plan, and after discussion with the warrant committee is recommending 1% merit plan. That's down from 2%. Article 13 is the operating budget. You might want to take a look at the second page on that. It gives where the other sources besides the property tax are coming from. So basically, of the total operating budget, we're getting $5,364,000 from other sources. And the major ones there include the water enterprise, sewer betterment stabilization fund, and the school building assistance grant for the 3 school projects. They make up the bulk of those funds. Some of the others are bond premiums on bonds and whatnot, interest from pension reserve fund. Okay, Article 14 is the capital budget. And that's all set out in the warrant report, what projects are being recommended. It's down again from this year. We've gone from 500,000 down from the tax levy down to, I believe, 361,000 on this year's tax levy, which if, is getting into the dangerous territory. I mean, it costs you that much for a truck now. So if you cut that any further, you may as well not have a capital budget.
Well, I mean, I think hopefully coming out of this year, the capital plan this year, we'll be able to have a longer term. I mean, a longer term.
I would hope so. I don't think it's going to be a smaller amount.
No, but I
Because
think,
you're
I mean,
gonna identify
it should cover
projects.
vehicles and the rest of it, so we can figure out, okay, over the next 10 years, here's what we have to pay in
How to
trucks.
fund it, yeah.
And then we figure out year by year how much it's gotta be, instead of, I mean, we shouldn't do it annually and just say we have some amount and try to fit in that amount. We've really gotta figure out what the needs are
We've
and
been
figure
trying
out how
to
to
do
fund
it
it.
so, more or less on a 5-year basis, but now Jerry's trying to develop a 20-year plan, so that should give us a better idea.
There's no Chapter 9, was it Chapter 90 fund? So in the years past, the capital budget hasn't only been funded out of tax levy, it's also been funded from, I thought it was Chapter 90.
Chapter 90 was just highway fund.
Right.
There's also unexpended appropriation balances and a few other sources like
There's
that.
I see the unexpended appropriations here. There's none of those other
Our
sources.
new public works director doesn't feel that Chapter 90 funds should be used to purchase equipment. He feels they should be used to repair and maintain roads. So that's why there's nothing in there for this year. Plus, I think we bought a couple of trucks last year, so he's pretty good on equipment for right now. But that's something when you meet with him, when he comes in to meet with you, that's something you might want to discuss with him.
Is there a legal readout on that, Mark? Is he right?
There's no legal restriction. You can use it for purchase equipment. You can use it, purchase, repair roads, whatever. The Board of Selectmen has to vote to approve the project application,
Yeah,
whatever it's gonna be used for. So ultimately, it's up to you what you want to recommend. He will make a recommendation to you on what he believes it should be for.